Hello, it's Marianne again. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I figured it was about time for me to update everyone on how things are going in terms of my real life, I guess. This year was pretty difficult for me. I experienced a depression unlike anything that I'd really experienced before. It was very strange, and it gave me a lot of insight on what was going on with Martin before. I think the last time I did one of these I was talking about how I had written a book detailing like sort of my worst case scenario in terms of Martin ending his own life, and it really allowed me to explore like those feelings properly. And I talked about Yuri on Ice and how it kind of helped me reconnect with who I was as a teenager, and I sort of hope that I didn't feel like I had, especially after the election. After that happened, I kept writing and writing and writing. And then I eventually took on a job writing for the remastered dub of Gundam Seed and Gundam Seed Destiny. And that was such a surprise. Like, writing was something that I have always wanted to do, but never thought that I had the ability to do it for some reason. Like, I mean, I knew I was an pretty decent writer, but writing for fun and writing professionally are two very different things, because obviously when you're writing professionally, you have to work on deadlines and you have to make sure that you're consistent. And there's a lot more factors that come into play when you write professionally that just don't happen when you're writing fan fiction. And when I was writing fanfic, I wasn't really outlining stuff before. I've started to since, but I wasn't really outlining stuff. I didn't have a clear idea on where my stories were gonna go, so they kind of petered out. And I'd get writer's block because I had no idea where I was going, and then I would get discouraged and I wouldn't write for years at a time. So I interpreted that as me just not being suited to the profession. But when I was actually given the tools to do the job right, I realized that I was pretty good at it in terms of just keeping to a schedule and being able to push through those periods of block. The job that I was doing was script adaptation. So basically I was taking transliterations and putting them in more colloquial English that would fit the mouth flaps and the picture more appropriately. I had a basis there to work with, which makes working more consistently more easy. I feel like this is a lot of irrelevant information, but whatever. There you have it. That's what I spent the last 8 months doing. I was offered the writing position in May, and it just finished 3 weeks ago, I think. So I went from writing 1 episode a week to 2 episodes a week, and then was promoted to lead writer and was writing 4 episodes a week, which this is the first project that I've ever worked on in this capacity, but when I was speaking with the producer on this project, she was saying that normally people only put out about 2 scripts a week. So the amount of work I was doing in retrospect was pretty insane. It resulted in about 60 to 70 hour work weeks, no days off. If I did have days off, it was when I was going to a convention to work. I basically was operating under this assumption that I could keep working on this like at that rate of speed and with that sort of intensity for, I don't know what I thought. I mean, I was like, oh, it's only, 6 or 7 months, it's not going to be a big deal, and that time just, it snowballed. It didn't matter if it was 1 week or a month, it just felt like forever. And then we had, in the summertime, this huge heat wave. It was like 115 degree temperatures for 10 days or something like that. And our air conditioning broke and would not stop breaking. It was leaking through electrical fixtures, and there was all this stress of worrying about burning alive in my house in the middle of the night. So lots of stress. And because of all of these stressors, I started noticing that I was losing my memory Anytime I tried to eat, or not so much drink, mostly eating, I would get these severe like stomach pains. Like basically my body started telling me to stop, and I wasn't listening because I was like so fixated on staying true to this word that I had given, which was that I would do the project at the rate that they asked me to. I let my pride get in the way of an actual healthy approach to this workload. During the periods of time where I would have like spotty memory or be in pain anytime I ate, I really took a nosedive emotionally. Like, I started just having these revolving door thoughts about, why am I just waking up every morning at 8 a.m. and working until 10 p.m. Like, what life am I even living? Like, what is the point of doing all of this work if I'm only working just so that I can live another day to work more? I didn't really see the point in living. I was never suicidal per se. I just was more okay with the idea of dying, I guess. And it's so weird, like, looking back at this year, it's something I should be happy about. I mean, we went to China and Thailand in March. We had our friend come visit us a couple of times this year. We went up to San Francisco to visit her. We started making ice cream this year. I mean, me being a lead writer on my first project is a really big deal to me. I really want to go into production to try and create a safer work environment for women. That's been a really huge goal, and POC, of course. But it's been something that I've been working towards for the last couple of years, especially, and having that kind of leg up is really I mean, I had a moment this year that I was told that a person who was on a project that I was working on was a white supremacist, and it expressed the fact that he thought that the white race was superior multiple times, and I ended up getting his job because he got fired. And like, that's, I don't know, for someone like that to be replaced with someone like me, the complete polar opposite of that, I don't know, that's a big deal to me. And the fact that, I don't know, it's just, I did make real tangible steps this year towards something better. And I got really frustrated with myself during the heat of all of this because I just couldn't see that progress. And I feel like that's something that a lot of us can relate to, especially when you're working in a job that you just aren't passionate about. I mean, if I'm feeling that way about a job that I am passionate about, like, I mean, granted, when I was working in an office job, it was kind of the same thing. Like, when you realize that you're out of school now and you don't have breaks anymore, and you only get 1 or 2 days off every once in a while, it really fucking sucks. And especially when you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's so hard to even think about what makes life worth living in the first place. Especially if you just spend all of that time working to better someone else. If you're working for a company, at the end of the day, like, most companies are just there to benefit the person who owns them. And obviously consumers benefit as well, but there's very little, it's hard for you to see your part in that picture, especially when you're just dedicating so much of your life to it and they don't appreciate you. Not that I'm saying I was unappreciated. My overwork was my own fault, and I accept that, but there are lots of people who can't, they don't have the option to just turn around and look for something better because they're struggling to make ends meet in the first place. But I started having these, not only just like I don't see the point in living, but I started having these conversations with myself anytime I started going outside. Because I was spending so much time at home working on the computer for hours and hours every day, I talked to people less. I would text with people less just because I was focusing so much on this project. And when I stopped talking to people, they stopped talking to me. And then I just started thinking, well, clearly no one likes me, no one cares about me, so why? That's really the only question that you can stop at, really, or the only question that goes on in your mind during that period of time. And then even from there, it's just the self-loathing kind of compounded upon itself. And when I would go out and I would try and interact with other people, even for jobs, like there was a time where I was only really leaving the house to work. And when I would go and record or go and watch a session or whatever, I would leave, and then I would spend hours convincing myself that the people I spent that time with hated me, and that, oh, that one fucking thing that I said is going to ruin this relationship, and blah blah blah. I mean, I'm sure it's something that everybody's thought in their life, but I realized after a while that that wasn't fucking normal. I've always kind of had that like assumption of, well, you know, it's better to assume that everybody hates you, because if they don't hate you, then it's a nice surprise. But that kind of permeated into everybody hates me all the time, no matter what they say. And that's not healthy, and that's not normal. So I started seeing a psychiatrist, and I started taking medication, and I started speaking with a therapist as well a couple months ago. I don't know. I thought it was anxiety, and it turns out it was depression that was aggravating that anxiety, I guess. I started taking Lexapro. It's been very helpful in keeping me in the moment and out of just my constantly cerebral headspace, because obviously when you're writing, you're not interacting with people a lot, you're thinking. And I mean, Gundam is very political and anti-war, and it's easy to get caught up in the message of it. In order to accurately portray the messages that they wanted to portray, it took a lot of thinking on my part, and that sort of stuff just, I don't know, it contributed to a weird jumbled mess in my head. And thankfully the Lexapro has kind of helped sort that out a bit more. I think the fact that I'm doing this without crying kind of goes to show that it allows me to think more clearly and without emotion. Whereas before I realized that I was just kind of shoving everything to the side and hoping that I could deal with it later. And that being said, after I finished the job, I had this weird panic. It was some strange, even with the medication, it was like this strange mix of, well, now I'm useless, I have nothing left to do, I spent all this time working to this end, and it's not the climactic finish I wanted. I should be happier. I should be more accomplished. I should be something. It's very easy to forget that we live our life moment by moment, that everybody lives their lives moment by moment, and that the achievements we do happen with so many tiny steps that you can't see the progress unless you turn around. But if you're too busy thinking about the progress you haven't made, you don't look at and take in what you've done. Even if it's staring you right in the face. And I started noticing after I took the medication, like all the ways that depression like lied to me about the work that I was doing, and like how I wasn't making progress, even though the sheet said like, look at all this shit that you've done. And you know, just thinking that I was wasting my life when I'm not. I'm doing exactly what I asked for. And I don't know, this all sounds so humble braggy, but I mean, I'm not saying this to congratulate myself. I'm saying this to point out that depression makes liars of us all. It just makes us feel like we aren't worth anything because we don't do anything. And then it wipes the memories of the things that we have done to fool us into believing the things that we say. I mean, the other day I had this weird moment, And granted, I was not entirely sober, but I had this weird moment where I was like, just straight up putting myself down and I didn't even realize it. I was saying that I looked like a fucking garbage heap. Like, literally saying that. I don't honestly believe that, but for whatever reason I felt it was true in that moment. And that was really upsetting to me, that for even a second I would think that. But that's just what happens, you know? I don't know. There's never really a moment where you're like, I'm fucking depressed. This is it. This is depression. It sneaks up on you and it's just there. And it hides in those corners that you ignore completely, because if you try and deal with what's in those corners, it's just too much work. So you put it off and you put it off. And then that darkness goes and swallows up the whole room, and pretty soon you're left in the corner and you feel like you have nowhere to go. So when I was in the corner, I started talking to a psychiatrist and a therapist. I had a very severe depressive episode after Gundam Seed was finished. I think what happened was I tweeted something and then I had this endless, invasive thought that I was egotistical and that me simply just, it was me sharing some nice memories, and I was like, I'm at the center of all these memories. So clearly I must think that the entire world revolves around me and that everyone is tired of hearing about me and blah blah blah. But that's why it's just me talking. Like, everybody talks, everybody shares their experiences, but for whatever reason I did not think that I deserved to do that. And it wasn't something it wasn't something I've ever believed before, but for whatever reason I could not shake the thought. I felt like the entire world looked like a horror movie shot in a fisheye lens. It was really weird. The colors were different. The entire world changed. My reality was different. And I was just like standing in front of Martin and crying. I couldn't move. It was so intense. Sorry. So after that happened, I went to the therapist and I was talking to her about it. And she was saying, when I was there and I was explaining what was going on, I just kept saying things, these cyclical things that have no real answer, or like asking these questions or saying these things that have no real answer and no real purpose. They're just there to fill the space, to fill whatever void is in my head at the time, and I have to fill it with these fucking terrible thoughts. And so my therapist asked a simple question: what brings you joy? And I said, making ice cream, but I eat too much ice cream, so that is definitely a downside. And she was like, no, stop. That's the fucking thing that you do. You ask the question, what brings me joy? It has one answer. You don't need the second half of that thought. We all know that we shouldn't eat too much ice cream, for fuck's sake. But if eating ice cream in that moment is the only thing that makes you happy, then you should fucking do it. But you should make sure that you ask the question first. Because I don't want to advocate for unhealthy habits, but at the same time, we worry so much about what's right and what's wrong constantly. So much so that like even our most minuscule actions feel like they're being judged sometimes. I mean, we can't go to the store and buy clothes without supporting sweatshops, and we can't fucking, buy a car without contributing to global pollution, and we can't buy food without contributing to food waste or subjecting communities that have food deserts or something. I mean, like, there are so many things to be guilty over that it never really allows us to see our lives for how great they are, because we're too busy worrying about other people elsewhere with less. It's important to keep them in mind, but we can't allow other people to dictate our feelings at all times, because being depressed about those things doesn't really help anybody. It doesn't do anything for anyone. It just makes us miserable. So, I mean, there were seriously times where, like, when I was eating ice cream, I would think about starving orphans in Africa, and like, they're not gonna be here. Nothing I do can change that. So just eat the fucking ice cream, you know? So for the last couple of weeks, I've just been trying to focus on things that have made me happy in some way, and cutting out the things that don't, which is why I am here sitting in my office with no makeup on and in my pajamas. I just start asking questions of things that the way I've started approaching everyday life is just by asking that question anytime there's a decision that needs to be made. Will eating this cookie bring me joy? No, probably not. Depending on will eating this cookie bring me joy? In that moment, will it make me happy? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Or, will shaving my legs bring me joy? That one's usually a no. Those things, those little things. And it's helped simplify my life a lot. And it's helped me sit down and focus on getting things back on track. The week after I finished Gundam, I spiraled out really hard. I had that depressive episode, and then I had to go to a convention for the whole weekend, and it was really hard. Just kind of keeping my head up, and I don't want to say going along with it, because I did enjoy the time that I spent talking with people there and everything. It was just I was so exhausted, and I didn't feel good about myself, and I didn't know why anyone cared about me. So it was just a very exhausting experience. But coming home and focusing on what is going to bring me joy is the Monday after I woke up, as soon as I opened my eyes, I asked, is getting back to work going to make me feel joy? And the answer was a resounding fuck no. So I had a couple of days off, and then from there I started looking at my to-do list, and I started asking myself, is vacuuming the floor going to bring me joy? And the answer was usually no. And so then from there I'd start negotiating, like, okay, well, what if I just vacuum the one little room in here, and then, take things one small thing at a time. So I started making, I really like making ice cream. Martin suggested that we start to make ice cream for ourselves just as a hobby, and I've really taken to it. So I decided to make ice cream as thanks for people who have hired me this year. So I started with that, and then from there that built to, getting chores out of the way, and from there that built to getting year-end tax stuff out of the way. Blah. And building bookcases or things that have been put off for the entirety of this year because I've just felt too drained in every way to even address them. And now I can look around my house and, when I was working on those scripts, it was hard to see any real progress because it was just spreadsheets. But now that I'm taking this week between Christmas and New Year's to really address those sorts of like sores that were waiting for me to deal with them. I don't know. It just feels good to know that I've done something this year that I can look at all the time. I know that this video was probably a big jumbled mess of words, and I kind of apologize. I can't say I still quite feel like myself, but I can say that I'm feeling better. I don't know what myself is anymore, really. I'm still kind of, we're always learning who we are. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to change or to be different. It is strange looking in the mirror and realizing that that person is someone completely different than who you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. But I don't think that's something that we necessarily need to be upset by. It just means it's something new for us to work with. I hope all of you had a safe and happy new year. And for those of you who are waiting on the holidays to finish up, I wish you a good holiday season. Try not to let life get to you in the way that it is so good at doing. Here's to 2018.